We'll speak a little bit on the topic of existing responsibly. This is the National Climate Week to raise awareness about the environmental impact that we are having and the consequences of it. So we'll speak for about half an hour, and then if there's any discussion, we can have that. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shamati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prashadane Nirvishesha Shunnavadi Pasadeshatarane Mukham Karoti Vacharam Pangam Langate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurudinataranam Parmanandam Madhavam. So, to start off our discussion on this very important and relevant topic, I wanted to share a pastime that appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is also known as Bhagavad Puran, which is an ancient scripture, Vedic scripture. Puran means in Sanskrit ancient. So they're composed of activities of great personalities that teach us something. And that's why Purans are also known as Purnas, because they complete. So the Vedas, they are the more instructive part. So they give instructions in terms of principles. And the Puranas, they illustrate those principles through pastimes or incidents. And of the Puranas, the topmost Puran is considered to be the Bhagavad Puran. So this incident that I will share with you, it appears in the 4th canto of the Bhagavad Puran. So it begins with once upon a time. Once upon a time, many years ago, there was a king by the name of Maharaj Vena, and he was a very powerful king. He was so powerful that when he was enthroned, then without him doing anything, all the miscreants, the robbers, the thieves, the bandits in the kingdom, they simply left the kingdom and hid or went to the jungles, because they were scared of being chastised by the king. But the king was also very arrogant, because he was so much consumed by his own, the sense of his own greatness. So he became so puffed up and so arrogant that he forbade the worship of anybody but him. And he said, I am your all in all, I am the provider, everything is meant for me, I am the enjoyer. So why should you worship any of the demigods or even Krishna? Because ultimately I am providing everything for you. So because of this, the balance was destroyed. In the Bhagavad Gita, which is quite famous and probably doesn't need an introduction, Krishna talks about the balance between humans and demigods. That we offer them oblations and sacrifice, and then they respond by providing rain and climates. So the Brahmanas, or the intellectual class, they became very concerned, and they tried to counsel King Vena. But King Vena was so drunk with his own power that he insulted the Brahmanas and chastised them. So then the Brahmanas did what they very rarely do, but because this was something for the benefit of the public, that they cursed King Vena to die. So because of the curse of the Brahmins, which is infallible, King Vena died. But unfortunately, because there was no suitable successor, there was nobody to ascend on the throne. And the robbers and thieves and bandits who had fled the kingdom out of fear of King Vena now returned and began to wreak havoc. And because of the lack of a proper king, the public actually fell into more disarray. So then the Brahmanas, they did something to rectify the situation. So by chanting special mantras and by following a specialized process, they churned the body of King Vena. So from his thighs, there appeared a very dark, short person, which they called Nishad, a very sinful person. And because of his propensity for sins, the Nishad was asked to leave the kingdom and live in the jungle. So the Nishad from the Nishad descended the forest tribes that generally live outside the rules and regulations of the scriptures. By churning the arms of King Vena, an effulgent and a magnificent personality appeared. And he was Maharaj Prithu. So he was actually an expansion of the Lord Shri Krishna himself. When Maharaj Prithu, being the personification of religion, he quickly re-established order. So he began to rule by the counsel of the Brahmins and according to the prescribed rules and regulations. But then he noticed that there was widespread famines because there were no crops growing on the earth. So when he pursued Mother Earth and asked her what was the reason for this, and then she replied that because of the preponderance of sinful activities and because there was no proper Vedic processes being followed, she was forced to withdraw all the opulences that she had. But now that the kingdom was being ruled by the pious Maharaj Prithu, she happily gave forth all her opulences. Not just the plants and the vegetables, but many other mystic opulences. So this pastime that appears in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, it is factual, and it also gives us many lessons. So Maharaj Vena, he represents the exploitative mentality of people. So if you look at his conduct, what was his approach? It was here and now. That I am over here and I need to enjoy now. There was no consideration to what the Brahmanas, the intellectuals, were telling him. There was no consideration to what the prescribed responsibilities from the scriptures were given. His only consideration was to exploit things around him to please him, please his own senses to the maximum. Maharaj Prithu, on the other hand, represents the propensity to follow the instructions of the intellectuals, the learned class, and to live a religious life according to the scriptures. Under the rule of Maharaj Vena, there was widespread suffering. There were natural disturbances. There was lack of food and famines as a subsequent result of his actions. People were not happy, but everything was restored. when Maharaj Prithu came. So when we look around ourselves, we see that there is a preponderance of the mentality of Maharaj Vena, where people individually and collectively have this notion of enjoying to their maximum. So there is a little consideration of what the intellectuals, what the learned are telling, and there is little consideration to what is prescribed, what should be done and what should not be done. And this is resulting in so many disturbances in our environment. There are some that we can see empirically and some that we are being told by those who have the knowledge and the equipment to measure it. So I was doing a little bit of research on this, and some of the things that are actually manifesting even as we speak is the melting of the glaciers. So they say that just in the region of Alaska, every year 53 million tons of ice is lost. Since they have started measuring over the 7 years, 370 million tons of ice has disappeared. And the world temperature has gone up by 2 degrees since the turn of the 20th century, since 1900. The sea levels have increased by about 10 to 20 centimeters in the last 100 years. And the protective layer of the ozone, which protects us from harmful radiation, has shrunk by 5% in the last 50 years. Now there is debate that's going on, what is the cause of it, what is the effect of it, but we can look at it from a perspective of what we are seeing and what we are being told is happening. And that is from the more empirical perspective also. Then there is the philosophical perspective, which is what this pastime illustrated to us. That as long as we live in harmony with nature, then we are living in the mode of goodness and we will experience happiness all around. When there is excessive exploitation of Mother Nature, then this cycle of karma begins. Because as per karmic law, it's a sinful activity. When somebody is taking what is not supposed to take and is taking without returning, it's sinful activity. And what's the cycle of karma? What does it state? That anything you do bad, there will be repercussions to that. This is a universally accepted principle there. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he openly declares that this world is his own energy. So in chapter 4, verse 7, he says that earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence and false ego, all together, these 8 constitute my separated material energy. So all that we see around us, earth, water, fire, the oceans, the rivers, the trees, the forests, they're all an manifestation of the energy of Krishna. And Krishna goes along to say that in the very next verse, that besides these, O mighty armed Arjun, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises of the living entities. That is us, who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So these 2 set of verses give us 2 important instructions. One, that everything that is around us does not belong to us. It belongs to Krishna. But it has been given there for our use. Krishna also accepts that. Now the point is that if we are living in somebody's house, if you're living as a guest in somebody's house, how do we live there? We live according to his rules and regulations. So if we go to somebody's house and we say that the person may give us a room to live in, so we live in that room. We don't move into the person's bedroom and say that I'd like to live over there. He might give us a place to take a bath. We take a bath over there, right? We won't knock into his bath and say, okay, this is my bath, or this is now my car, or this is my table. We live according to what the person has established for us to live. So we are living in Krishna's house right now, and Krishna has also told us that what is the best way for us to live, which is in harmony with nature, to take only as much as is needed and not more. So one of the great leaders in India, Mahatma Gandhi, he famously said that there is enough for everyone's need, but there is not enough for everyone's greed. And actually speaking, there is not enough for even one person's greed. So they say that the whole universe comes short to satisfy the greed of even one person, let alone everyone. And that is why there is so much of strife, because people are not satisfied with what they get, but what they don't have. They're aspiring for that. And the result of greed is fear. So the example that is given is that if I were to steal from somebody else, maybe I couldn't steal successfully. Maybe the person is not able to catch me or does not have the strength to catch me. But still, the fact that I have a guilty conscience will weigh on me. And there will always be this fear that I may get caught, that what I have stolen, somebody else may steal up from me. So that is why this is not just a material problem. It's not just the fact that people are competing for a shrinking pool of resources. It is also vitiating one's consciousness, because we may recognize it explicitly or not, but implicitly we know that we are stealing from Krishna, and for those of us who can, we are stealing from others. And just in terms of how much are we stealing, again I did a little bit of study on that, and it's a little alarming. So they say that the deposits of oil and gas in the world will run out in 53 years. India was at one point called the golden bird because it had unlimited amount of gold. How much gold does India produce now? 0. All the gold mines in India have run dry. As of today, China produces 90% of the rare metals in the world, and they have indicated that they have only supplies lasting for another 15 to 20 years. So we live in an environment with finite resources, and as we consume them, then the stockpile is not getting rejuvenated. So this is the legacy that we are giving to our future generations, a world that is depleted of its resources. And exploiting the resources is just one part of it. The other part is, what is the effect of it? So we already saw that it affects one's consciousness, but it also affects one's health. So according to research, that over the next 20 years, the number of people afflicted with cancer will increase from 19 million to 30 million. In the past, we have cured so many diseases like smallpox, influenza, measles. but people are still dying. They are just new diseases or like new pandemics like we are seeing now that are coming up. The top causes of diseases now is, of death now, is cancer, heart disease, and autoimmune disorders. And the one thing that you'll notice common amongst the three is that these causes of death are the body attacking itself. These are not coming from outside. The cancer is simply your body cells, they start dividing and they don't know when to stop. And heart attack is again, your heart gets weakened and stops working. So as opposed to people dying from old age, or people dying from physical exertion, or people dying from infections, the focus now is the body itself is intrinsically getting weaker. What can we do about it? So Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who's a famous Vaishnav leader in our lineage, he makes this point that the first step in solving a problem is recognizing that there is a problem. So that's the first step, that we should recognize individually and collectively that there is a problem. And right now, that's where the biggest disagreement is. There are people who consider all these changes to be part of a natural cycle. And there are, of course, people who are seeing things in a more holistic way, and they are raising various red flags. So as practicing devotees or aspiring devotees, it is good for us to have a spiritual perspective also. So in this context, Krishna gives us some advice in a scripture called Ishopanishad, which appears in one of the Vedas. So this is the very first verse in Ishopanishad, where Krishna says, everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota. And one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So the mood of this verse is, it's not living in an ascetic mode where one minimizes one's existence. The mood is living in a happy balance. So first is understanding well to whom everything belongs. So understanding that everything is given by Krishna, by God, by Mother Nature, that takes away our exploitive mentality. And understanding that all that we need is that which is sufficient for us to live comfortably. This is the golden rule of environmentalism, that one takes as much as needed, and also one replenishes what one takes. So, so I had a few specific suggestions in this, which may be open for discussion, but it's my take. So the first thing that we can do is become vegetarian, because the meat industry is actually one of the biggest contaminant in the environment. So they say that 1 pound of meat requires 2,400 gallons of water. 1 pound of wheat requires only 25 gallons of water. 95% of the world's soya beans crops are meant not for humans, but for animals. So according to the EPA, animal agriculture is the number one cause of water pollution. Every day 14,400 acres of rainforest is being destroyed to make space for animal farming. And these livestock that are being farmed, they produce 16% of the world's toxic gases. So they produce more toxic gases than all the cars and all the transportation system in the world combined, and the list goes on. So this is just looking at it not even looking at it from a mercy perspective, which is also important, but just looking at it from a material perspective of how toxic it is. Since 2001, World Bank has stopped supporting projects that fund livestock farming. So the point here is that even mainstream institutions are now recognizing that. So best for us is to become a vegetarian and encourage others to become vegetarian. We are kind to Mother Nature. Mother Nature is kind to us, and we are kind to our own health. Second point is that we become a conscious consumer. So one of the aspects of consumerism is plastics. So every year, 500 million tons of plastics are produced. And this is expected to double in the next 30 years. Now, of this 500 million ton that is produced, 40% of it is what is called as limited lifespan, which means that 40% of this plastic is used for maybe a few minutes to at the most a few hours. So these are people getting wrappers for food, and they eat the food, and in 5 minutes they throw the wrappers away. Or people getting bags of plastic, and by the time they reach the home, they throw it away. All this plastic is not biodegradable, and it ultimately ends up in what are called the sinks of the globe, which are the oceans. So they have spotted plastic islands the size of Belgium, which is affecting the sea life, and they leach into the water. They're affecting the alkaline pH balance. They're affecting the way that these larger animals get caught in this plastic. They're coming up to the seashore and contaminating it. So this is one of the more glaring examples, and something we can easily do, which is say no to plastic. Get our own bags, reusable bags, use it. In India, I know plastics have been banned, but you go to the shopkeeper and then he'll do a wink, nudge, and say, I'll give you plastic. And we say, okay, fine, let's take the plastic. But actually, we are, at the end of the day, we are impacting ourselves. Third thing that we can do is to look at our energy consumption. So talking about resources that are depleting, so we already mentioned that gas is going away, and the same is the story with coal. It has a slightly longer exhaustion life, but it is also rapidly declining. And most of the electricity that is produced right now is out of this so-called dirty energy. About 80% of it is from oil and coal. So the EPA reports that 2/3 of the global greenhouses are linked to burning fossil fuels for heating, electricity, transportation, and industry. So about 18,000 people die every day because of this air pollution. And lung diseases are at least like in hotspots like Beijing and New Delhi, Bombay, lung diseases are growing exponentially there. Especially they're affecting those whose lungs are weakened either because of age or because of other diseases. So it is estimated that 6.5 million deaths each year will be linked to the pollution in the air. Now this is more than the deaths that are caused by HIV, tuberculosis and road accidents combined. So it is said that after high blood pressure, dietary risks and smoking, air pollution is the 4th largest killer. So best for us to use energy from renewable sources like either solar or wind or water, and ourselves become conscious about how we consume our energy. The last aspect that I had was it's a catch-all. It's this notion of consumerism that we live again in an environment, and especially in the US, which is an opulent country, where we consume a lot more than what we need. And the National Geographic actually had a study done saying that, is this over consumerism making us happy? And the answer was no. So they surveyed 65 countries, and they determined that people who had high incomes and high material opulence did not necessarily consider themselves to be happier. In fact, they consider the trade-off point to be an annual income of $13,000. This is in the time of the study, $1995, and after that the additional income was just manifesting as over consumerism. It did not really change the quality of life or quality of one's well-being. And increased consumerism comes at a steep price. So one of it is obesity. As of now, 65% of the adults in the US are overweight or obese, which has its own medical challenges. So not only are we stressing the environment, but we are also not getting any significant happiness benefit out of it, and we are impacting our health. In addition to that, we are also depriving others of what they could use. So there's an agency called WorldWatch, and they report that the annual expenditure for cosmetics in the US is $18 billion. The estimate for the annual expenditure required to eliminate hunger and malnutrition in the entire world is $19 billion. The expenditure on pet food in the United States and Europe is $17 billion. The estimated cost of immunizing every child and providing clean drinking water for all is $16.3 billion. So this is money that could be used to save lives and to shape the future of children. So the World Bank reported in 2015 that 1 billion people in this world live on less than $2 a day. So this is classified as extreme poverty. Over a quarter of the world's population lives at $3.20 a day, which is below the poverty line. And half of the world lives on less than $5.50 a day. So this gives us a sense of the sharp divide between the haves and the haves not. So when we are thinking of what we can do, one of the things that stops us is saying that what will I do? That what will one plastic bag make a difference in the 500 million pound of plastics that are being produced annually. But it's the little people that make the big difference. In India, back in the 20th century, in a small house, in a small room, there were 4 people who would meet, fairly insignificant people, and who would discuss about how to free India from the clutches of the British. 2 of these people were Mahatma Gandhi and Lala Lajpat Rai. And in a matter of 20, 25, 30 years, they actually achieved what some said was impossible to do it. And we see even now tales of individual courage and heroism. But even if we do not want to be in the limelight, or even if we are not destined to be there, that does not mean that we don't do what we can. Each one of us is a leader in our own realm. We are leaders to ourselves, to our family, and to the people around us. So when we make a change in our life, then we inspire others to do. And as more and more of us become more and more conscious, then the change happens. Even if it doesn't happen, at least our consciousness is clear that we did our part. So I'm going to conclude with a verse from Isuknishad, the second verse, where Krishna says, "One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way. For that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma." So that sort of work was the first verse I said, where Krishna said that one only takes what is set aside as one's quota. So he says when one lives in that way, one can aspire to live for hundreds of years and live without any adverse reaction. And then he concludes the verse by saying, there is no alternative to this way for man. Okay. So I'm going to stop over here, see if there is any comments or discussion. So I see some questions on the chat. Given how toxic meat consumption is, should we avoid any and all association with meat eaters? Thank you. That's a good question. It's from Dhyani. So the first part is absolutely correct. That yes, we should recognize that meat consumption is toxic, and we should avoid associating with it in our own lives. So we fear not, we become vegetarian. We encourage our immediate and extended family members to become vegetarian. Then what do we do about those who are still meat eaters? So we can do several things. We can inspire them by words, which means share. I was once watching, this was by PETA, and they set up these small booths. And this was in London, and there's a young man sitting, and he would just engage in debates, friendly debates with people. And it was interesting that most of the people had no idea of the impact that they had. That he would show them pictures of animals in factory farming, and they were horrified. Not sure whether it changed their life, but many of them we could see that they were horrified. That by the time they eat meat, it's nicely wrapped, and all the cruelty behind it has been abstracted away. But once they see that, a lot of them said, yes, I'll rethink it. So we can associate with them in that mood. We can associate with them in terms of inspiring them, in terms of teaching them, terms of enlightening them. Like it's said that one should hate the crime, but not the criminal. If we start becoming virulent and toxic towards the people who are meat eaters, then we are no better than them. We are also spreading a different kind of hate. But yes, we should recognize the fact that meat eating is bad on many levels. Bad for the environment, bad for the health, bad for the consciousness, bad for your spiritual advancement. And with the advantage of that knowledge, it almost behooves us to make others aware of it. There's a related question. What about from Eric? What about consuming eggs and dairy? It's a good question. So eggs are in the same category of meat, because ultimately they are factory farm produced. Eggs are basically unfertilized, or maybe they're fertilized. They're unfertilized fetuses, right? So before they become chicken, you basically eat them. So it's another form of meat eating. Dairy is a good question, because as Vaishnavas we do consume milk, but the focus is to take milk that has been produced under more favorable environment. So the milk that is produced by the industry is produced from cows that will get butchered when they are not able to produce milk. It's produced from milk that the calves are deprived of. Is produced from the milk is produced from cows that have been given all kind of hormonal injections. So not only is that milk bad for your health, but it also has a lot of bad karma. So yes, as far as possible, we should avoid that milk. And there are alternatives. Like Gita Nagri provides milk. The cows are they graze in the meadows. They're happy cows. You go there, you will see they're happy calves, and they're of course not slaughtered when they're not able to give milk. And then they're just they're just allowed to graze peacefully, not given any chemicals, etc. And there may be other also farms that are producing milk that is more in the mode of goodness. So if possible, we should go for that. Okay. So Miriam is saying, Hare Krishna, would we be able to chant 3 times together for those in the community who need prayers? Okay, we'll definitely do that before we end the class.
Your question.
Yes. There is a question from Rajneesh Prabhu. Is it really possible to put some kind of tangible governance on how much one should consume as self, community, country? We just seem to be going for more the merrier. It's good in theory, but difficult in practice. That I think governance, if at all, would come in the terms of guidelines, which is abundantly there. There are so many guidelines in terms of at least in terms of food, right? They say, how much do you need? 1800 calories, 2000 calories at the most. So almost now I'm seeing that almost all the doctors, when you go to them, one of the recommendations that they give is try to be a vegetarian. When you start filling up the medical form, one of the questions that they ask you is your food style, food habits there. So there's a lot of what I would call a soft push. The general understanding, being vegetarian is good. In terms of having specific guidelines, it kind of comes in the Big Brother mode, where everybody has to weigh the food and eat it, or depending on so many, if you have a job that requires a lot of physical work, you're expected to eat more. And if you're somebody like me who sits on the chair all day, should eat less. So so depending on your age and your lifestyle, it's different. But even if the people are able to understand this from a philosophical perspective, that we eat enough to stay healthy, and we eat enough to satisfy the demands of our activity. We don't waste. It's amazing how much food is wasted at the cafeteria where I work, because they can't carry food over from one day to another. One of the staff, she saw that there were literally drums and drums of food that were thrown out at the end of the day, and she was shocked. It was an accidental. She was waiting for a ride, and then she saw that going out, and she went and asked, and she said, "What is this?" Said, "This is just food that's not been consumed." And then she got really upset about it. So, and so she did something about it, and now all the food at the end of the day, it goes to the homeless shelter from the cafeterias there. Sometimes we joke, because the food in the cafeteria is expensive. We say we'll wait for it to go to the shelter, and we'll eat it over there for free. But which, it's a joke. We don't do it. But yes, so those kind of things where people are just are aware of the notion of sharing, not wasting. I think that's where we would get the ability to change the most. Okay.
And those who have questions, you have to go off of mute to do so.
Right. So if you can unmute yourself to ask a question, or you want to put in a chat.
Hare Krishna. This is Ananda Vrindavan. Thank you for a great class, and what a great reminder to all of us, just the details that you gave of different, the different areas of the world or of our earth that are suffering. So I just, our culture, our spiritual practice is so connected to all of that, how we live, and being conscious of the impact of how we live as we try to uncover ourselves spiritually. So I really appreciated that balance, that sometimes we can just concentrate on developing our relationship with Krishna and just chanting our mantra and finding peace there. But then how to, as they say in yoga circles, yoga off the mat, how to actually really walk our talk. And your comment about sometimes we think, well, what can one person do? Because I often think like that, I'm saving my scraps and trying to compost them. I'm thinking just this few little scraps compared to all the food waste. But yes, it feels good that I'm personally making my effort. And if enough people personally make the effort, things can actually change eventually. So thank you I thought it was a really encouraging class. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. And the inspiration for this topic came from Anand Vrindavan, and I thought it was very, very appropriate and relevant. So I like that phrase, yoga of the mat, that we tend to become armchair philosophers, but which is needed, because I am one. But I also feel that the real reason the philosophy is given to us is when the rubber hits the road, is that we actually manifest it in our lives and inspire others. Okay, so if there...
Just to add to that, this story of King Prithu and, the exchange and relationship that he had with Mother Earth, it's just recommended that we all go back into that Leela in that canto, that story in the 4th canto, and read it. It's very beautiful, and it's also, for me, again, hope-giving that the earth is a person, Krishna is a person, and does reciprocate with our efforts, small as though they may be. Or sometimes, eventually, if you are a king in a big position, you can also affect huge change by becoming more conscious. So I loved the story for just the loving exchange that was there.
Thank you, Mataji. Okay, so if there are no more questions, and or comments? Dhyanima, you have a chat or something in the chat?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you okay.
I have found through the years of trying to work really closely with the earth that it's really important to keep in mind that this is not about me, it's often about future generations. I've worked with children at an outdoor experience where we'll have the first group that comes for the first 2 weeks plant the seeds, and then the next session will be reading, and we have to explain to the children, you may not see the benefit of this, but it's coming into the future. And so you get a sense of the interconnectedness between yourself and future generations when you take care of the earth, because of the necessity to be patient and work with the seasons. You can't rush things in nature, so you have to give it time. And like the first thing they say when you move somewhere is to plant fruit and nut trees, because they can take over 10 years to produce any fruit. So that's a beautiful way to connect with the children and the future generations, is to remind ourselves that our little bit of effort is bringing us closer to the future.
Thank you. That's a beautiful thought. And I think if that's the kind of legacy that we leave, we can leave the world happy. I mean, right now, not sure what kind of legacy will we leave. Think of 50 years down the road when I'm sure their technology is always working. They have some other alternatives, but our experience with technology is that you trade one thing for another, and it basically gives you relief from one part and it aggravates something on the other. But it's a declining scale. I think if we inspire people to think like that it's not for the here and now, but it's a legacy to our future generations. Okay, so I'll end here. It's very nice to see the few of the devotees who were brave enough to turn on the camera, and also nice to see the others who are joined over the audio bridge. So I'll end over here. Brajbhai Prabhu, any concluding thoughts?
She was asking to chant,
remember? We had a request from Miriam to chant 3 times together for those in the community who need prayers. So we'll chant together the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you so much, Bhayahari Prabhu. That was really enlivening and wonderful. And do we have any morning announcements in Nanda Vrindavan?